Hi everyone, this is Sherry Rice Smith of EFT forChristians.com. Today what I want to do is a little bit on trauma and memory. This is a heavy duty conversation, so for those of you who really don't have any immense interest in the science, this one is one you may want to skip. For those of you who are as fascinated as I am about the science, this one you might want to listen to. I do have some notes, so I will be glancing at them because I don't want to miss anything while I explain what I want to talk about here. Remember, EFT is not used for any kind of medical emergencies. If you have some kind of psychological or medical issues, please, 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 please do call your own medical doctor. Thank you. I want to give a definition of what trauma is, and I know that I don't mean it as a diagnostic term here. I'm just talking about those horrible things that happen to us in life, and they often tend to be overwhelming. We have an inability to cope. We can't do a thing about it, and in the end, sufficient numbers of these, and they can be repetitive or they can be different. They tend to just kind of take over in our life or have a life of their own. When these types of episodes happen, or events or memories, we have no resources. We often think we're going to die. Sometimes simple traumas, simple events just have there's a one-time thing that happens, maybe Hurricane Katrina hits your house, although that's a pretty big one. Perhaps you have a kitchen fire. Perhaps you have a car accident. No injuries, maybe there's no fatalities, but it's a pretty big event because it kind of messes things up for a few days. And then we have other ones that are more complex traumas. They're ongoing, they're repetitive, they happen over and over again, and then those are often the ones that become imprinted, and they direct our life because we tend to repeat that same type of trauma. I don't want to say we attract it because that term often turns Christians on, but in essence, it's kind of what we do because of the beliefs that they form in our heads, so that we are kind of looking for the same thing to happen. We expect it to happen, and therefore, many times, it does happen. When we as practitioners work with these heavy-duty events, it's not up to us as a practitioner to interpret this. This is all up to the client. It's all subjective. It's based a lot on perception, what it meant to the client at the time that it happened. There's a lot of helplessness. There's a lot of hopelessness tied into it. There's a lot of upheaval that's long-term. Many times it's for decades. It's all interpretive. So as a practitioner, stay out of it. That's about as nicest way I can say. You're there to do the process. You're not there to change the client's mind. You're not there to interpret what on. You're not there to force them to forgive anybody. You're just there to tap whatever information and memory they hand you, or bodily sensations. That's your job. Otherwise, it's not really your opinion. So get out of the client's way. And for you clients or people who have big traumas, you really, really, really do have to hire somebody to help you. These are not things that EFT is meant to do as that self-help tool. It's EFT as a self-help tool is the simpler stuff. The nervousness you have because you have to give a speech tomorrow, or you're not happy because you have to take a 400-mile trip alone. That type of thing. Types of things that can cause these quote traumas are deaths, natural disasters, combat, abuse, rapes, incest, medical procedures. People forget about those, especially if they're done as kids. If you've had repetitive medical things done to you, those are scary and hard. Divorce, and I'm sure there's tons of other ones. Those are what I consider some of the bigger ones. These are built up on previous traumas in our life, our perceptions around that. We build these experientially because these events tend to be repeated. If there's an emotional abuse thing going on as a child, it isn't going to happen just once. It happens over and over, and it's like the same scenario just keeps showing up. And these are the stuff that gets, ingrained and stuffed into our bodies. They're kind of like compounded triggers. They just keep coming and coming. The way we tend to tap this is sort of the way we tap everything. We go back further and further into memories to find the roots of what happened. Where did it start? When you begin to tap in a session or with a new client, often we practitioners will, do the more recent stuff, but then we just kind of keep going back. What did that remind you of? What's that remind you of? What does that feeling have a memory of? And we go back in. A lot of times the behavior is illogical. Clients often say this doesn't make any sense, but here's what I'm thinking. And that's the important part. You need to tell your practitioner what you're thinking. You may think this is dumb and it's got nothing to do with anything. Often it does. And it's stuff that needs to be explored. For those of you who enjoy looking at this stuff, I do have a reading list that you can email me at eftforchristians@gmail.com, and I'll give this to you. But a couple books you might want to keep in mind is one is by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And Bessel is spelled Bessel, and Vanderkolk. His book is Body Keeps a Score, and it was done, I think, in 2015. It's a pretty thick book, but he's written it very well for the layman. And he's been working with trauma for like 30 some years. He worked with PTSD before that diagnostic term was ever used, back when it was shell shock or whatever it was during Vietnam or whatever. Dr. Peter Levine has a couple books. In an Unspoken Voice is one of them, and another one is Trauma and Memory. He also has Waking the Tiger. He's got several of them, and I think Unspoken Voice is probably my favorite, although Trauma and Memory is pretty good too. Dr. Robert Scare does The Body Bears the Burden. I was trying to remember that one. And there's a couple of versions out there. I find that that's a little more of an expensive book. Those other ones you can get for about, $15 The Body Bears the Burden, I think, is more for medical people. So, because he talks about whiplash, and that was his life body of work. So that one may not be one that you as a layperson, unless you're really interested, would be interested in doing. All right, this is going to end up getting busted up into 2 videos because I have more stuff than I want. This next part of what I want to discuss is Eric Kendall's material. Eric was born in 1929 in Austria, and he lived through, the Nazi stuff with Hitler back, during the late 30s into the 40s when Hitler went through Austria in 1938. Eric won a Nobel Prize in Medicine, I believe, in the year 2000. He's the one, when I talk about doubling your neural connections with every hour you think about a thought, that's his material. So that's who's the material. Anyway, trauma is often built on 2 things. It's built on explicit memory and implicit memory. Explicit memory are the parts of memories that we consciously remember. They're declarative. Words can describe them. We often have them in the context of a time and place and people that are involved. There's a language component. We can talk about them. Sometimes they're autobiographical, because we'll say the time when we did this, and you'll go off on a story about something you remember. Those are explicit memories. Explicit memories are also good for learning facts, like when you had to learn your multiplication tables, 2 times 2 is 4. That's the part of your memory that processes that for you, and I'm sure reading is in there too. So those are interesting. And the hippocampus doesn't come online until about the age of 3. So often traumatized kids don't have very many of these explicit or declarative memories because the stuff happens so early that there's just no mechanism in there for that to be emotionally or mentally digested. I guess that's about the best way I can say that. All right, I'm going to end it here. I will do part 2 about implicit memories next. If you have any questions, email me and at EFTforChristians@gmail.com. Come to my website, EFTforChristians.com. And remember, I have those books. I do have that reading list. If it's something that interests you, come to Milwaukee to one of my EFT classes. I do talk about some of this in those classes, not as much as how to do EFT. And remember, always take care of your own emotional health. Contact somebody if you do need help. All right, God bless. Take care. We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.